All right, so good evening. Sorry this is late coming out again. Uh, been on spring break all week. Lots of things, a lot of projects working on. Also doing some grading. We'll get information out to you ASAP on observations. So reminder: the 27th is our next our next and final. Well, I guess it's not our final. We have one more face-to-face meeting in May, but uh, so it's our middle face-to-face meeting on the 27th. Look forward to seeing everybody. So this week, presentation and discussion is focused on group development, a really important part of the way in which we operate in schools and to your success as future administrators. So we'll dive right in, gallop through some slides. Look forward to hearing your discussion points on this week's discussion board. All right. So think about your experience working with a team at your school or within your district. Lots of different opportunities that you have. So just take a couple seconds and think about uh, maybe it's been a positive one. Maybe there's one recently that hasn't been very positive for you. So when we think about these groups, we need to consider and think about the kinds of groups that are in schools. Obviously, we have faculty. There's a whole, as a principal you're working with. You've got departments, your grade level teams at the elementary schools, or maybe teams within the middle school, content area teams. You mentor and beginning teachers. You've got school leadership team. That may be your guidance department, along with your assistant principals and athletic director and whoever you'd view as part of your leadership team. Maybe it's at your department heads as well. You've got parent groups, PTO, PTAs. You've got committees that you're going to be working with within the districts that about levy campaigns, and then you got accreditation, that lovely task of accrediting your school. Um, so when we're talking about group and group development, but we have to recognize that groups are developed are built around individuals, and schools are made up of all these various kinds of groups. So you can't ignore the groups, but you also aren't ignoring individuals in this scenario. So here it's important to think about the fact that context matters. And this slide's got a lot of information on it, so let's try to break some of it down real quickly. We're talking about some different fits that exist within the organizations, within the groups: a person to organization, a person to the group, or a person to the job. And so there's different kinds of emphasis that occur within these various connections. But schools and teachers are complex, and teachers engage in work at the organizational, group, and task level. So as your teachers are working in all those spaces, and that's important for you to think about and keep in mind as you imagine being the leader, the administrator in a school. So continuing here, you also have to recognize that your personal beliefs and backgrounds as a principal shape the preferences for groups and individuals. Some types of schools can also influence the principal's perception and preference. Um, Individual principals have shown a surprising consistency towards certain characteristics. That person to job fit is really important, but person to group and person to organization is also really important. And then you also have to understand that the hiring process and the way in which we pick people out, and this is some work that Dr. Engel has worked on, also is really important in this principal preference in the way this works and the influence of policy. So when we talk about an effective group, there's task dimensions, and Glickman talks about task dimensions and person dimensions. So let's look at some of those things here real quick. So task roles, here's a jumble of the various kinds of task roles that Glickman identified from Bean and Sheets' work from the late 40s. And then here are the person roles. That way in which someone is encouraging towards the person involved. So task The task roles are about getting the job done and the ways in which we move the group forward to accomplish the work that it's designed to do. And the person roles is about creating those personal relationships to make it a place that's good for people to work within. But we also have to recognize that within this within groups, there's also dysfunctional roles. There are roles that um, can really hurt the way the group operates. And we need to recognize that those exist. We have to anticipate that those exist and be ready to deal with and address how we're going to deal with those various dysfunctional roles. So, Hersey and Blanchard starts talking about situational leadership, and they have 4 styles of leadership: the telling, the selling, the participatory, and the delegating. And these have various kinds of pieces between whether the way in which they view task and relationship. So high task, low relationship is that telling, very directive, right? High task, high relationship is that selling. I'm really engaged with you, but I'm keeping a grip on the task as well. High relationship, low task, where participatory, my relationship is more important, and then this kind of delegating, this really hands-off kind of style in style 4. But then there's also within situational leadership this notion of whether the group's readiness level, right? Are they unable or unwilling? Unable but willing, right? They want to make certain things happen at level 2, but they just don't have the skill set to make those things happen. Readiness 3, they're able, they have the capacity, but they're unwilling to do it. They have an insecurity about the change itself. And then finally, willing and able. Obviously, we want to get folks to this confident, willing, and able level of readiness. So here's kind of a picture of the way those different leadership styles and readiness levels interact. And as the group moves farther and farther, we want it, you hope that you can get to this delegating, this kind of really I think what it's that notion for me that Jim Collins in Good to Great talks about, this metaphor, the flywheel. That when you get a group that the flywheel, like on your lawn, on the lawnmower, that is taken off and is self-perpetual, right? It's moving, it's on its own. It's got its own life. It's got its own inertia moving forward. That's where we want to get. Right? We want to try to get folks to this where we can take a leadership style 4, and because our group maturity is in readiness is at readiness level 4. But we do need to talk about how we address and deal with these dysfunctional group members. So when we start seeing them, we need to observe, when we hear about this existing, we need to observe them. We need to try to understand there's something that's missing. There's some reason why they're behaving in that way, and that may be an insecurity on their part. That might be the way in which they have developed their own self-worth or value within the organization. Maybe the way they buffer their fears. Right? We need to be able to communicate with them and establish some rules, and then redirect those, then have the ability to redirect. And sometimes that's hard, right? Sometimes people are unwilling or unwanting to really look at how to improve, and so their ability to be redirected can be very difficult sometimes. Definitely within any group, there's going to be conflict. Oftentimes we see conflict as a sign of a really high functioning group, because there's no fear for bringing up dissenting views. But we need to have a way in which we operate, in which this conflict can come to resolution and the group can move forward on its task. And that conflict isn't there just to be there. It's actually there to help strengthen the group. So here are the five steps of resolving conflict that Glickman kind of outlines. And I really like this kind of number 5, in which we really try to get away from this dichotomous kind of view, right? We get away from this notion that it's one way or the other, but that there is some kind of third alternative. And there's a really great set of practical leadership literature out there around notions of third alternative, and what that is, and how seeking out that third alternative really can open up the door for massive innovations, and for the group to think about a problem in ways that they just haven't thought about it at all. And by seeking those third alternatives, it really opens them up, and can be really exciting. Glickman also has this area about preparing for the meeting, and I think this is really, really important. Um, this is, it was always a peeve. We have a meeting because we're scheduled to have a meeting. We have a meeting every month at the same time with the same group. It's a standing meeting time, but do we really need to have the meeting? One of the things that I did as a principal, and I stole it from my superintendent. My faculty meetings started when I'd have faculty meetings once a month, and I would work with my leadership team and my secretary to develop a memo that we called IOI. And these were information only items. These were things that I needed the staff to know. We didn't need to discuss them. We didn't need to have a meeting about them. And so I would produce an IOI when I would produce the agenda for the faculty meeting. So if we were having faculty meeting on Wednesday, by Monday afternoon, I would send out the agenda for Wednesday's meeting, as well as the IOI items. And there would be a spot on the agenda to clarify anything on IOI. And so everyone had a copy of the IOIs 2 days in advance. They would read through them, and I would start the faculty meeting, call the meeting to order, and the first agenda item was always IOI. You receive your IOIs on Monday. Any questions, anything that you'd like to, concerns or anything that you'd like to discuss? If not, we'll move forward with the rest of our meeting. If they had questions about them, we'd answer them, but most of the time they didn't, and we could move on. I didn't take meeting time dealing with information items. Information items were handled ahead of time in a memo. And really effective. Faculty really appreciated it. It opened up a whole space in our faculty meetings to do things like professional development, or professional peer presentations that we just wouldn't have time for if I talked about all the information items. Preparing for group meetings, this is also really important, and establishing the ground rules. And one of the things from professional learning communities work, DeFore talks a lot about the importance of establishing ground rules. In fact, in every school that I've worked at where we've engaged with professional learning communities, we set the ground rules as that was our first product, was what the ground rules were. And one of the ways in which the best way to do this that I know of, and I actually heard DeFore present on this topic and bring this idea forward, was the best way to get people to start establishing ground rules is to ask them to tell you what their meeting pet peeves are. So for me, it's a pet peeve of mine is a meeting that starts late, ends late. If you're going to publish a time, the meeting should start at that time. And someone else may say, I think it's a peeve of mine. It's a real peeve of mine that people come to meetings but are grading papers or doing other things other than being at the meeting. And so these become the ground rules, right? This becomes, we accept the ground rule that our group's meetings are going to start on time and they will end on time, whether we're through the agenda or not. That when we come to our meetings, all of our other work is left away for the meeting, and our group's tasks are the only focus of the meeting. Each individual's focus of the meeting. These are great ways to start the conversation. You come up with a list of 5 to 7 rules, ground rules for the way we're going to operate, and then you hold each other accountable to them.